Hi, I want to say a few things about the first chapter of Their Eyes Were Watching God. You might have read it already, and maybe you're well into the book, but if you haven't, this might help you. And even if you have read the chapter already, this might clarify some things for you. One thing to notice is that it starts with what's called a frame narrative, meaning the text picks up and we as a reader get into the text after all of the events of the novel have happened. So the very first thing that's happening in that first chapter, which can seem a little disorienting at first, is that our main character, Janie, has come back from her time away. We get hints about what has happened, but we don't know for sure. And I just want to point out a few of the interesting details, like I would if we were in class together, which I'm so missing. But I want to point out a few details and some of the humor of the book, and maybe as you get into it, you can start to look for that more and more on your own. One thing to keep in mind, those first couple of short paragraphs at the beginning make these big, broad statements about men and women, and I would keep that in mind as you read the rest of the book. What sorts of things is Hurston trying to suggest about men and women, even in those first couple of very poetic descriptions? Ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. The idea she seems to be suggesting is that men are always thinking about what they can imagine, their big dreams, what might happen. Whereas in the next paragraph, we see now women forget all those things they don't want to remember and remember everything they don't want to forget. The dream is the truth. Then they act and do things accordingly. She's sort of suggesting maybe that women are a little bit more down to earth. You can see as you read through the book if you think the story shows that. And then we get to that third paragraph, which is a little odd. So the beginning of this was a woman, and she had come back from burying the dead. So two things there. We aren't even told Janie's name until a few more pages in, and we get some foreshadowing there. She had come back from burying the dead. So you can think about that as we go through. And also, not the dead of sick and ailing, with friends at the pillow and the feet. She had come back from the sodden and the bloated, the sudden dead. So we know she's come back from something pretty rough right here at the beginning. And then notice the next paragraph. The people all saw her come, and they had all gathered on the porch. And notice the end of that paragraph. They passed nations through their mouths. They sat in judgment. It's all these people sitting on the porch talkers, as she refers to them, as Hurston refers to them. And we see they are just so curious. And just a couple paragraphs later, we get this long list of questions they have in their heads that gives us hints about what we're going to eventually hear about. What happened to that blue satin dress she was wearing? You know, what happened to that young man she ran off with? So we get hints of what these porch sitters, porch talkers in the town she's referring to are curious about. And they're just curious sort of for gossiping. We see their attitude towards Janie quite a bit. We see how they notice, the men, of course, notice her body. The women notice her clothes and are noticing that she's wearing these overalls, and they kind of want to judge her about that. And then they judge her for not stopping to talk to them. She's been away a year and a half. She comes back. She's wearing overalls, which is a big change for her. And then they're upset that she doesn't stop and talk to them. And they're debating about Tea Cake. Tea Cake's the nickname of the man she left town with a year and a half earlier. And then you can notice Phoebe's the one that stands up and goes to give her some food. All of the other neighbors are just gossiping and asking questions, but her good friend Phoebe, what does she do? She goes to give her some food. And even when Phoebe leaves, one of the neighbors says, well, I'll come with you so the boogeyman doesn't get you. And Phoebe just puts her off. Of course, I don't have to worry about the boogeyman getting me. So she goes to get her food, and the porch sitters are all upset. Their questions aren't answered. And you can tell Phoebe and Janie are such close friends because they just kind of pick up where they left off. She just kind of walks up. Phoebe doesn't ask her tons of questions. She just gives her something to eat and lets her just sit and talk when she's ready to talk. And Janie says, you can tell him if you want, you know, it's up to you, but I'll let you know. Phoebe even makes a joke at the top of, it's the top of page 6 in this copy of the book. Maybe it's different in your book. She makes a joke about how her husband says all these porch sitters, they just go to church because they want to be there at the judgment day, because the judgment day is when all the secrets are going to get revealed, and they just want to be there to hear the secrets. So we see some about the hypocrisy of these townspeople. And again, we see they want to know what happened. They want to know what's happened in this year and a half you've been gone. And that's the main thing. Then we see Janie sort of settles in and starts to tell the story. Just keep in mind, the entire rest of the book is Janie sitting there on her back porch with her close friend Phoebe, telling the story basically of her whole life, not just of what's happened in the year and a half since she left the town. But then in chapter 2, it picks up really with Janie going back and telling her life even before she ever knew Phoebe. So it's what's called a frame narrative. The beginning starts after all the action of the novel has concluded and Janie has come back to a town she left. All those questions about where she's been and what happened to Tea Cake, that's all the things the townspeople are wondering about. And we're going to learn as we go throughout the rest of the novel. So it begins in a way that can be a little disorienting if you aren't used to this kind of narration. But that's a little bit of a couple of highlights and things to keep in mind as we get into the book. And hopefully I'll walk you through some more chapters and give you some commentary again later.